and welcome to this Astranti YouTube video based on reviewing the pre-scene. The reason why we're releasing this video is because the pre-scenes are starting to be released for the various different levels, and it's very important that you read through it and analyze it effectively. So in this video, I'm going to go through the technique for reviewing the pre-scene, and this is a very small snippet from our exam technique series where we look at how you can prepare for the case study exam. And we have these series of videos and kits for every single level. So that's the operational level, the management level, and the strategic level. That differs from our theory revision series, which looks at the key topics within each level. And if you do want to know more about the pre-scene, do also check out our pre-scene video series and our industry analysis, which looks at the pre-scene in a lot more detail and also does a lot of industry research for you. But this particular video is just going to go through the 7 steps of analysing the pre-scene if you were just to analyse it yourself. And whilst the video I'm going to go through is specific to the strategic case study, it can be applied to the management and operational case study as well. Whenever I say E3, just substitute in E2 or E1, etc. They're the same sorts of approaches, same sorts of models to be used, just at the different levels. So, what is the process for reviewing the pre-scene alone? Well, the first thing to do is get a copy of the pre-scene. That should be obvious. And then conduct an E3 review, or an E2 or an E1 review. And this will probably be the majority of your analysis. The case studies are more rooted in the E's than they are in the P's and F's, particularly as you get to the management and the strategic level. Then conduct a P3 review for the key risks and for governance issues, etc. Then an F3 review for funding and other financial issues like that. Then come up with a strategic plan for how you would approach issues in the exam. Come up with your likely issues based on your analysis, and then finally conduct some industry research to find some examples to back up the kinds of comments you want to make. So let's go into a bit more detail into each of these, starting with the pre-scene. Now, to get a copy of the pre-scene, simply go to the CIMA website or to the Astranti Study Hub to download a copy. And then conduct your E3 review. And this relates to 2 core activities at the strategic case study level, but it will also apply to core activities at operational and management as well. And the ones that applies to for strategic as to develop business strategy and to evaluate the business ecosystem and business itself. And you can apply various models and theories to this and do this while you're reading through the pre-scene. So as you're going through, say, oh, that's a value chain issue. Oh, that's a SWOT issue. That's an ANSOS issue, etc. And also complete the models at the end. So if you've got some holes in the model after you've read through the pre-scene, just think about some issues that are likely to be prevalent for this case. So even if there wasn't a specific weakness that was mentioned during the pre-scene, just think about the kinds of weaknesses that are usually facing organizations in this position and other generic weaknesses. And you could then look at the mission and the objectives of the company, a Pestel analysis to look at the greater environment in which it operates in, Porter's 5 forces for the specific competitiveness of the industry, then conduct a corporate appraisal for the strengths, the weaknesses, and the opportunities and threats facing the company. Also think about the kinds of strategies that you might suggest for the future, looking at generic strategies in ANSOF's matrix. And also remember to consider your stakeholders, so your staff, your shareholders, the board, your buyers, suppliers, etc. Have you identified any key powerful suppliers and key powerful buyers? And finally, conduct a balanced scorecard analysis to look at where the organization ultimately wants to be, what's its mission, what's its objectives, etc. Then look at the SWOT, where it is now, and identify some objectives from getting to the where it is now to the where it wants to be, and use the balanced scorecard to audit progress towards achieving those goals. Then on to the P3 review. This time looking at core activities relating to risk and control environments. And to undertake a risk analysis at management, strategic or operational level, you have to look at the risks facing the company and look at the controls that have been put in place to monitor those risks. Think about IT risks and cyber risks as well. Is it a company that has a lot of data and manages a lot of data? And what obligations does it have to stakeholders to keep that data safe, etc.? How well governed is the company as well? Look at the board of directors that's usually given as a list in the pre-scene. Are there any governance issues? Is the CEO and the chairperson the same person, etc.? Do they have the audit, nomination, and remuneration committees? Because according to governance, they should do. And also look at general operational risks as well. Are there any health and safety issues if it's a manufacturing company? Then an F3 review is also important. And again, for the strategic level, that will be looking at recommending finance strategies. And you can revise key F theory from your study texts or from the revision series and then apply that to the pre-scene. And ultimately, this will revolve around analysing financial statements. So looking at the net profit margins, the gearing ratios, how much debt to equity is there in the company, the current and quick ratios, how many current assets does the company have compared to current liabilities, how many times over can it pay off its current liabilities with its assets, because that affects the liquidity. The working capital cycle as well, how quickly it's getting money in, which is important for cash flow. Shareholders as well, what are the shareholders expecting, what kind of returns are they expecting? And also think about cash and funding, and that's very important because that was specifically given to all of us as a part of the role that we are playing in the CIMA case study exam, and that goes for every level. If we're going to undertake a new project and we don't have enough money available, how can we fund, how can we finance this project? And then once you've done that, create a strategic plan. So imagine that you are the CEO of this organization. You're running this organization. What kinds of strengths does the company have? How can you maintain these strengths? If one of the strengths is the knowledge of its employees for the particular industry, how do you maintain that strength? How do you make sure your employees stay at the company and apply their knowledge, etc.? What are the weaknesses of the company? It's got poor cash flow. How can you improve the cash flow? What sorts of opportunities are there to pursue? Is there a big idea that is referenced throughout the pre-scene, a big opportunity, and yet it doesn't look like the company is taking any steps to follow that particular opportunity? If so, why not recommend that? How are you going to manage the threats facing the organization? If there is a decline in the industry and you are solely within that industry, perhaps you need to diversify into other industries to mitigate the impact of the decline within the industry. And also, again, linking back to funding, where is the money coming from? How are we going to fund any of these opportunities? How are we going to fund actions that are going to mitigate against threats? And make sure to write it out so you familiarize yourself with it and you can replicate some of the points that you bring out in your exam. And then once you've got a good idea about the company and what the strengths of the company are and where it is, why not write out some likely issues? What do you think is going to come up in the exam? And an easy way to do that is to think about what has been mentioned repeatedly and also what is very common at that particular level. So, for example, ethics is very important across all levels. Risks is important across all levels, but for certain levels, budgeting is very important, operational, and acquisitions and business valuations is very important at strategic level. So, for example, if you are looking at the pre-scene and you notice from your SWOT that there's a lot of staff issues under weaknesses, perhaps, and you're thinking, well, we've got a real risk of staff leaving. There's also the risk we're not getting the right amount of recruitment in. They don't have the abilities, or there's health and safety issues, etc. Then think about staff. Is there likely to be a staff issue? What kind of models can we use to look at staff there? Perhaps we'll look at Mendelow's matrix to see where they sit in it, whether they're powerful stakeholders and we need to make sure they are satisfied, or whether they are not powerful enough individually to have any impact, but then they might come together as a collective and then have more power, etc. And then once you've done that, think about possible approaches to it. Again, thinking about your staff. How could you deal with issues over staff? Is there a motivation problem perhaps? Perhaps you can, again, bring in more models here, bring in Maslow's, Hertzberg, etc. to talk about motivation. And then which option are you going to choose to deal with this? And then create your recommendation around that. So you're practicing for these likely issues. But do be aware that the unseen can change everything. Even if the same issue is constantly coming out throughout the pre-seen, and then you get the unseen exam and suddenly the unseen says that's not an issue at all. In fact, this is an issue and you never even considered that. You must go with the unseen, not the pre-seen. The unseen is what you are sitting your exam based on. So that's the most important thing when you're actually in the exam. And once you have done your issue analysis, you can look at the industry as well. And the examiner specifically stated that they would like students to know more about the industry to apply their knowledge in the real world more effectively. So do look up industry trends and example companies, etc., to broaden your knowledge and note down some examples that you can possibly bring up. So, for example, if there is a motivational issue in a particular company, in a particular industry for the pre-seen, and yet you find another company in the real world that's in the actual industry that had motivational issues and what they did to help motivate their staff, that would be a fantastic example to bring up. And there's no secret of where you can get this information from. You can just look at websites, financial statements that are published on Companies House, etc., to find comparable statistics to measure. Industry sites as well, particularly if the industry is something like pharmaceuticals. There are actual specific industry locations that have lots of information about the general industry reports on those sites as well, and just Google it as well. If you are doing a pre-seen on a company in a particular industry, just Google issues in X industry, and I'm sure you'll get plenty of things that you can read to broaden your knowledge. But do remember, this is not your absolute priority. I know CIMA has said that they expect it, but it is possible to pass this exam without having lots of extra industry information, industry examples, etc. It's more important that you conduct your review thoroughly and that you analyze the options thoroughly and you provide effective recommendations. So those are the 7 steps if you are looking to review the pre-seen on your own. And again, do see those theory revision guides for more information on the actual topics that are going to be involved at your specific levels, or the pre-seen video series if you want a more in-depth analysis done for you. But if you are choosing to do it alone, that is a good approach to take that will ensure you have comprehensively covered the material and you've got some good ideas going into the exam. So thank you very much for watching this video. I hope you have enjoyed it and found it useful. Please do like and subscribe at the bottom of the screen and visit the website www.astranti.com for more information. We're going to be posting quite a few of these videos over the coming months, so do stay tuned for those. It's going to have information about exam technique, we're going to have information about the case studies and also information about objective tests as well. So keep an eye out for that.